Hello, everybody. I'm going to start our intro off for today's webinar. Um, First of all, hello and welcome. I'm so glad you all could make some time to be here today. We are going to be doing our webinar, Now You See Me, Tracking DDoSia's Rapidly Changing Infrastructure. Before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. If you have a question, please feel free to ask in the Q&A section of Zoom, and we will address it at the end of the presentation. This presentation is being recorded, as you heard the automated lady say at the beginning, and we will provide that to you after this recording is ready, so probably later this week or early next week at the latest. And also, once this has concluded, we do have a brief survey. We'd appreciate if you filled out so we can continue to provide the most relevant content for future presentations. Today, our speakers are Mary Beth Lee from the Vertex project and Silas Cutler from Censys. I'm so glad to have them both here today. And with that, I will hand the mic over to Mary Beth to begin the presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay. So welcome to Now You See Me, tracking DDoSia's rapidly changing infrastructure. As Callie noted, my name is Mary Beth Lee. I am an analyst with the Vertex project, and joining me today is Silas Cutler. He is a principal security researcher at Censys. Today, we're going to be introducing the Synapse-Censys Power-Up and walk through how analysts can use it for research using DDoSia as an example. So first, we're just going to give a brief introduction to both Synapse and Censys for anyone who might be unfamiliar with those tools. Synapse is a central intelligence and analysis platform that's designed to fuse large data sets from disparate sources. Analysts can use Synapse to answer complex questions about multiple different scenarios within various analysis disciplines. With Synapse, you can normalize data from different sources, connect to various platforms, facilitate collaboration among analysts, and make workflows more efficient. And for Censys, I'm going to pass it over to Silas, who will give us a brief introduction.
Hey, I'm Silas. Here at Censys, we conduct broad scanning of the internet in order to build the most up-to-date, authoritative map on internet infrastructure. Organizations rely on Censys's visibility every day to uncover their own exposure of their network, monitor their supply chain for vulnerabilities. And over the past year, Censys has started doubling down on using our data and technology to proactively do threat tracking of adversary infrastructure. With Censys, companies are using our platform every day to discover new threats, find new exposures, and help make the internet overall a safer place.
So with the Synapse-Censys Power-Up, we're able to, as analysts, use both Synapse as a platform and also Censys as its broad overview of the internet and ability to hunt adversaries. So with this Power-Up, any analyst that is working within Synapse can query Censys's data to help them with their research and their analysis. That query is going to take place through a Power-Up, which is basically a Storm package and service that connect to external data sources and provide additional functionality to Synapse. With this Power-Up in particular, analysts are able to query Censys for current and historical host and certificate data, and then represent those findings in Synapse. So in this webinar, we're going to walk through a couple different examples of how an analyst might be using the Synapse-Censys Power-Up to help with their research. For our use case, we're going to be focusing on infrastructure associated with DDoSia activity. This is activity that Silas has been tracking for several years now, I think since at least February 2023. And so with that, we're going to switch over into my Synapse instance, and I'm going to hand it off to Silas, who is going to give us some background on what DDoSia is.
Sure. So I'm going to jump right in. So for folks who are unfamiliar with DDoSia, DDoSia is what the term that I've been using for a while for is it's a participatory DDoS framework. It's a denial of service tool, dissimilar from things like Mirai or Bashlight, which are just deployed on random hosts and then tasked from a central infrastructure, but often distributed in semi-malicious ways. DDoSia relies upon a similar structure in which tasking originates from a central set of infrastructure. However, instead of relying upon campaigns to distribute malware, it relies on supporters of DDoSia and the DDoSia community running the client themselves on infrastructure, theoretically, that they control in order to conduct large-scale attacks. It's very reminiscent of low orbit ion cannon, which was used back in the early 2010s by Anops and Anonymous to do DDoS targeting of various companies back then.
So DDoSia has been something that has been out there since at least 2022, I think, like early 2022.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of reporting. Silas has been tracking for years and things like that. The reporting that came out in this past July actually was from two different law enforcement agencies in Europe. So it was July 2025. Both Europol and the other enforcement agency, Eurojust, had both conducted a joint law enforcement initiative that was designed to try and disrupt a lot of the DDoSia activity that they were seeing. This operation was called Operation Eastwood, and this was, I think, about 2 days or 3 days rather of an operation, and they did succeed in disrupting at least 100 servers. They issued something like 9 different arrest warrants, and then they warned over 1,000 volunteers, which are the users that Silas had referred to, that they were like legally liable for the damage or the disruption that was caused by the DDoSia attacks or the DDoSia activity. However, despite this campaign to try and disrupt and stop some of this, the group was still able to recover and continue their operations. So this brings us to this past December, where both the US and European security agencies issued a joint advisory where they were warning about pro-Russian groups, including the group that's allegedly kind of like behind DDoSia, which is no-name 05716, that they were engaging in operations against both US and global critical infrastructure. Some of the things that they particularly noted was that it was sectors like the water and wastewater systems, food and agriculture, and energy that were at risk. One of the interesting things that this assessment noted was that for DDoSia and no-name 057, they actually said that no-name 05716 was a state-sanctioned project within a Russian government-established technology organization called the Center for the Study and Network Monitoring of the Youth Environment. It also goes by the acronym CISM. One of the kind of interesting things here as well is that so this was a IT organization that was founded by Russian decree in, I think, 2018. And according to the alert, they wrote that senior executives and employees within CISM had developed and customized the proprietary DDoS tool, DDoSia, paid for the group's network infrastructure, and served as administrators on the group's Telegram channels, where they provided everything from kind of like user manuals and tech support to suggested DDoS targets. So this was something that was very much orchestrated by this organization. Shortly after, I believe this was published, Silas published his most recent blog on DDoSia and tracking this group and this set of activity. So we can see that blog over here if we jump over to the Spotlight tool. And so some of the observations that Silas, that you'd written about from like your years of tracking was that one of the reasons that this group has been so difficult to identify and track and also disrupt is that there's really rapid infrastructure change that they're going through for their operations. And you had found that among the data that you had looked at, that servers typically have a really short lifespan. There was something like 2.5 days on average. So on one hand, at one side of kind of that spectrum of how long these things were online, if we go and we look at one example, something like that you would publish, there is this one server that was online for only a day, but then if we see the breakdown by hours, it was actually only observed online for 3 hours before it was switched out. But something like 10% of the servers that were identified were online for a little bit longer, between 10 and 15 days. This is an example of one of those servers. So we can see that this one was online from July 1st, 2025 until I think July 11th, 2025, and then it was switched out. So everything from 3 hours on a single day to something like 10 days. But overall, they're switched out very quickly, makes it difficult to identify and track and then disrupt this activity. So this is where the Synapse-Censys Power-Up comes in for an analyst who's trying to do any sort of research into this group and see if there's any activity that we're able to identify and then kind of get a thumbprint on this group and track them going forward. So all of the power-ups within Synapse live over in the power-ups tool. We're constantly building out new power-ups. Customers can also build their own. This is the Synapse-Censys Power-Up itself here. We have the documentation. We'll give all of the information about the different commands that it supports. One of the things that Silas had mentioned at the beginning is that Censys is kind of like doubling down on its ability to provide information about like everything on the internet and like the ability to track adversaries. One of the things that they've done is they've introduced the new platform API. Well, we've had this power up for a couple different years. We've also gone and updated it so that now you can query that platform API endpoints and ingest the data into Synapse. So you'll see both those newer commands that reference the platform, and you'll also see some of the legacy commands in this demo as well, since they're still there. So starting out with just like a very basic use case about how I might use the power up as an analyst, we'll switch back into tabular mode. So let's say that I'm researching DDoSia and I've modeled Silas's December blog. He included a list of servers and clients that he had found that he associated with DDoSia activity. I've gone and I've captured these as INET IPv4 nodes, and then I've tagged them with a tag rep Censys DDoSia to note that these are things that Censys has reported as associated with DDoSia activity. So now I want to be able to use the power up to pull in additional information from Censys. This can just be additional context, maybe more information that will help me understand why Silas said that these were associated with DDoSia. Maybe some of those details are things that I can leverage later on when I go and try to hunt for new additional activity from them or new additional infrastructure. So the first thing that I could do to go and pull in more information about like these already identified network indicators is I could query the power up and use a node action to do so. Node actions are probably the easiest way to query a power up. All I have to do is click. They're installed alongside most of the power ups. Most power ups will have at least one node action. And you can also, as a user, create your own. So let's say that I want to just go and query the first three. I can highlight all of them. I can right click, go down to actions, and I'll get all of the list of power ups that are installed, find the Synapse-Censys one, and then I can run the platform host enrich command. That's going to go and query Censys, pull in data for these particular servers. It looks like it made 214 edits on 36 nodes. I can just go grab maybe the first one and I can pivot out to see everything that's connected to it in the graph. So I am in review mode right now. So that's going to mean that anything that's new that's brought in during this webinar is going to be have like a dotted underline highlighting it. So I can see that it brought in new INET flow information there. It also brought in some new INET server nodes as well. I can click on this one that has color coding because of the tag. And it also will show me that one of the things that it brought in from that query was that Censys had tagged this with being associated with remote access. So it gives me a little bit more detail about not only what Censys saw, but what their assessment was about that piece of data. So that's probably like the easiest way to go and run a power up is just using the node actions. I don't have to type anything. I can just go and click and run it. The benefits, it's quick and easy. It's installed alongside the power up. It's very easy for a user to go and select and run. However, there are drawbacks of node actions. They're limited. Not every command associated with a power up is going to have an accompanying node action. Some of the commands are going to expect you to include like options like a time frame or something that you're querying that you can't just click to do that. You have to actually use the storm query. So it's a little bit more limited. Not every option can be a node action. So in that case, if I wanted to run some of those other commands, I would just run it as a storm command. So I'll give you an example of one that I'll do here. Go ahead and run this query. So in this case, I'm lifting all of the INET IPv4 nodes that Silas included in his blog. I'm limiting it to just to 3 for the sake of example. And then I'm running a storm command that came with the power up, the Censys Platform Host History command. This is a command where I can include an option. So I have that tac period to say, I want host history from Censys for these hosts, but I'm only interested in the host history that took place during a certain time period. And that time period is between like the present day and July 17th, 2025, which is the end of that law enforcement operation. So I'm interested in any sort of history about these hosts since that disruption campaign. So I can see that it made about 4,000 edits on almost 400 nodes. I can go and grab this one at the bottom and pivot out to see what data was brought in. I can always use scroll to form to kind of jump around to things if I want to see what's there. I have some new INET flow information that came in as well. I can go and pivot around in there. I also have some server information that came back too. It looks like there are some scene times that were adjusted. Again, Censys said that this was associated with remote access from their visibility and what they observed. So in both those cases, we were able to use the Synapse-Censys Power-Up to go and pull in information about infrastructure that had already been identified. So Silas had this infrastructure that he knew was associated with DDoSia. As an analyst, I was able to just quickly go and query Censys data, pull in some additional details to see if that would give me more insight into why he said this activity was associated with DDoSia, anything that I might be able to use to go and hunt further to find maybe new infrastructure that they're using that hasn't been publicly reported yet. So if I wanted to be able to look for new infrastructure, what I'd probably do is use the Censys Platform search command. This is the most flexible option for this power-up, whereas before it was just specifically looking for host history or to enrich hosts. For the search command, I'm able to use the full power of the Censys query language to basically craft my own query based on whatever factors I decide, or whatever criteria rather, I decide to include that I want to look for. So this is where some of Silas's reporting really comes in handy. He had noted that this group operates with a minimal footprint. They have very limited public service exposure, so it can be difficult to try and get like a heartbeat on them to track. So this is something where I would probably go and dig around in a lot of the data that he has from like his various years of tracking this group to try and find like something, like some commonalities that I might be able to include in this query to help me identify infrastructure that might belong to them. So just as an example, let's say that we go over to stats mode. I'm going to look at all of the infrastructure that he released in his blog. I'm going to pivot over to look at the autonomous system networks that were associated with them and try and see like which were the ones that were most frequently used. And maybe these are some that I can include in my search. Maybe there are some other things that I might also be able to pull out, just kind of taking like the sum total of all of the data that he's done, all of his prior research. Maybe there are commonalities in there that I can all identify and then combine into a query to look for something that they're currently using that hasn't been released yet. If I do end up with a query that seems like it's fairly successful at bringing back things that I want, one of the most powerful options that I have within Synapse that I can then use is I can automate it. Anything that's written within Storm can be automated. We support both cron jobs, which would be helpful if there's a query that tends to work really well. And I could decide that rather than having to run this manually ever so often or whenever I remember, I can just go and I can create a cron job to run it maybe like once a week or once a day if I want to be really aggressive. This is an example of one such cron job that I'm running right now once a week. I'm using that Censys platform search to look for a number of different, like combination of different criteria. Anything that comes back, I'm pivoting over to the INET IPv4 addresses that are associated with it. And then I'm applying a tag reviewed at DDoSia. Once this runs, I can come in, I can look up that tag and go through and kind of verify like, yes, this looks like this is actually DDoSia infrastructure, great job, or no, this is not. And I can just go and verify those, remove the review DDoSia tag, and then apply my own tag if I want to and have new infrastructure to go and add to my collection of DDoSia IOCs. Another way that I could also use automation if I'm trying to hunt this group or hunt this activity is through creating a trigger. Whereas cron jobs are scheduled jobs that run either once or multiple times, depending on how I want to schedule it. A trigger is an event-based piece of automation. This is something that I would probably use with the first two examples that we did, where we were trying to enrich known infrastructure or pull in history information. This is an example of a trigger that I might use where I have like some sort of event. In this case, anything that I tag with a DDoSia tag, it might be rep.censys.DDoSia or maybe like review.DDoSia. Anything that gets a DDoSia base tag as a label is going to launch this trigger. It will go and it will operate on INET IPv4 nodes. It will run the Censys Platform host enrich command to enrich data from Censys, so whatever Censys knows about it. And then it will also run the Censys Platform host history command, and it's going to look for history between the date that this runs and the last 30 days, try and pull in the most recent information. Then I can go and review that, see if there's more information there about how this server was used or anything else that I can use to kind of build out this activity set. So at this point, we've gone through our various options of the Power-Up. We've used the Power-Up to query for additional information about identified DDoSia servers, as well as to hunt for new infrastructure. We've also used both node actions and storm commands to query the Power-Up. And we've discussed creating cron jobs and triggers to help us with both looking for like unknown or newer infrastructure, or enriching infrastructure that we've identified that's been reported. So in closing, I'm just going to switch over back to our slides, and we'll just talk about a few other additional options. So for this webinar, we've used a lot of Silas's prior DDoSia research. That data is available. He's made it available both on his own GitHub. It's also available in the Vertex Intel Sharing Synapse instance. So if you're interested in poking around, there's 2 places where you can find that data. Within the Intel sharing instance, if you don't have access to that, it's something that you're able to get through our website. There's just a little form that you have to fill out, and then it will send you an invite to that instance, and you can go in and you can play around, review the data yourself. You can also request access to a Synapse demo instance if you're interested in Synapse as a platform. We're also welcome you to join our community Slack if you have questions, or if you're interested in seeing like how we or others are using the platform. We also encourage you to visit Censys's website and sign up for a community census account, also explore what they have there, learn more about their data and their visibility. And lastly, to follow us both on Blue Sky or other social media platforms. I think both the Vertex project and Censys are on a wide variety of them. So we're out there. Feel free to follow us. And with that, that is all I have. So thank you for joining. And I think, Callie, I'll pass it back to you.
Oh, thanks, Mary Beth. So I'm back, and I just want to encourage people, if you do have any questions, please do ask them in the question and answer panel at the bottom of Zoom. We do have a couple questions for you both. The first one is, my company uses Synapse but doesn't have a Censys account. To my knowledge, is there another way to still try the Power-Up? I think maybe MB, you kind of covered that in that last slide.
Yeah, I believe if you have a Synapse instance and you're able to register for a community census key, then you can try the Power-Up using that census key. I think there might be some commands where you're a little limited because it is a community key versus like a paid key, but you'll still be able to try out a certain number of queries, things like that, and get a sense of what kind of data will come back and also how the Power-Up works.
Cool. So when configuring my Censys API key, can I restrict it? Can I restrict its use to my account only?
Yes, you can. So if you are using Synapse through, say, the Vertex Intel Sharing Synapse instance, and you are a Censys customer and you have a paid key that you do not want to share with everybody also using that Synapse instance, you can use TAC self, I believe, to configure it so that you're the only one, or your account is the only one that's using that particular API key. So there's ways to limit it to one user within Synapse.
Okay. Oh, got it. Where can I find the recording of this webinar? So we will be sharing this with people who did sign up. You'll receive an email where you can find the link for it. We're also going to be sharing it on YouTube. So that's forthcoming if you want to share it with your colleagues who might not have been able to join us today, or if you want to rewatch and find your place in this presentation. Is there anything else, Mary Beth or Silas, you want to leave us with before we exit today?
I don't think so from my end.
Excellent. Yep. Well, thank you so much for everybody who attended today's session. Again, we will have the recording available early next week. We encourage everybody to check that out and share it with your colleagues. We are going to end. And again, there is a brief survey once we close out the webinar that we would really appreciate it if you took a moment to fill out. Thank you, Mary Beth and Silas, for being here today for this presentation, and have a great day, everybody. We'll see you at our next webinar.
Thanks for coming.